Hello guys! So, for your course or your subject na IT Elective 3 or your Game Analysis and Design, so I will be your instructors or yours truly, Ralph B. Cadalso. Okay? So, let's proceed, no? For your IT Elective 3, our first module or our first topic is regarding games and players defined. So, for this particular chapter, we'll be discussing what are the attributes of a game ba? How do we consider something as a game? Okay? What are the different types of players na meron tayo that plays different types of games? What are their attributes? Okay? So, we'll be discussing yung mga yan dito sa chapter na to. But before we proceed dun sa formal discussion natin, no, let's just first observe what are the objectives ba of this module. So, you as the students, at the end of this module, you should be able to learn the following. So, the first one is learn what is a game and the attributes that makes up a game. Learn what are the different target audience of different types of games. What are the attributes of this audience or these players, no? Third, learn what are the different types of values gained from player by game developers. And lastly, learn what is the target audience composite and how to create a sample of it. So, let's start. Okay. First, let's start with defining a game. So, before we proceed in discussing the game system designs, game data designs, okay, or you as a role, or you as a game system designer or game data designer, we must first understand what is the basic definition of what is a game. Okay? It is very important that before we proceed in defining game system designs or game system designers or game data designers, you must know what is a game. So in here, okay, we'll be providing a very short description or very brief definition of what is a game. So games are human-made creations that have a specific attributes. So what are these attributes? Okay, we can simply refer to them as characteristics or let's say it's like a personality of a game, no? So, for this chapter, we'll be discussing what are the different types of attributes na meron yung mga games natin. Okay, what are the specific characteristic or specific attributes that, let's say, an activity should have before we consider it as a game. So, instead of trying to sum up everything that it means to be a game, it's more valuable to look at the various attribute criteria that must occur in order for us to have a game. Okay? So, before we can consider something like a set of activities, before we could consider it as a game, okay, there should be this checklist. So, ano ba yung mga checklist na yan? So, eto po yung mga yon. So, this is basically a simple checklist that requires all the checks to be marked in order for what we are looking to be considered as a game. So, let's say, for example, we have a set of activities. Okay? So, i-check natin ngayon itong nasa checklist na to if yung activity na to will have all these attributes or characteristics, then we can consider it as a game. So, what are these attributes or characteristics? So, the first one is a game has an agreed upon artificial rules. The second one, a player can have an impact on the outcome of a game. Third, a player can opt out of a game. Fourth, game sessions are finite. And lastly, a game has intrinsic rewards that hold no extrinsic value. Okay? So, these are the different attributes that we'll be checking, no, to consider something to be a game. So, let's start. First is agreed upon artificial rules. So, when an animal is hunting another, that is not a game. The goal is such a scenario are to kill or survive. Okay? So, that is basically not an artificial rule, no? So, kapag sinabi natin a scenario wherein kill or survive, it basically roots to instinct. So, hindi ito artificial rules. Kapag sinabi natin instinct, these are embedded in our, let's say, genes. Okay? These are embedded to us, sabihin na natin, animals. Okay? So, while there are physical limits to what can be done in the hunt, there are no artificial limits. There is no such thing as cheating in the hunt. Okay? So, we're still referring to artificial rules, no? Pagdating dito sa hunting, there are no such thing as rules. Okay? There is no such thing as limits. Okay? If you can hunt something or an animal hanggat gusto mo, then you may do so. Okay? So, ang magre-regulate sa'yo will be most probably the law. but it won't be an artificial rule na katulad dun sa mga games na nilalaro natin. Kasi kapag sinabi nating law, pwedeng, I mean na, hindi siya pwedeng suwayin. Okay? Unlike pagdating dun sa game, pwede tayo magkaroon ng mga parang cheat strategy, pwede tayo magkaroon ng mga cheats, etc. etc. Okay? So, let's continue. So, hunting is not a game, but we can observe many animals playing hunting-like games in the wild. So, let's say for example, yung mga bear cubs may wrestle but not attempt to hurt each other. Okay? Wolves may chase each other as they would prey, okay, without attacking. But these are essentially just games, okay? So, katulad ng mga games na nilalaro natin ng mga bata tayo. So, naghahabulan, nagtatagtagan, no? Okay? So, basically, we're just playing these games to enjoy, not to kill or to survive. Okay? So, kaya, that will be one of the main difference, okay, nung pagdating nung hunting versus dun sa mga game. Okay? So, mostly of us, we just play to entertain ourselves. Okay? Hindi para to kill or to survive. Next is, so in here, we have example of two activities, no? So, let's consider two forms of human combat. So, we have street fighting and collegiate wrestling. So, ano ba itong dalawa na to? So, there is a question in here, no? Which of the two is considered a game? Okay. So, the first GIF that we have in here, this is collegiate wrestling. And the second one is basically street fighting. So, what will be the main difference between the two? Which one is can we consider na game and alin yung hindi? Okay? So, the brief answer will be collegiate wrestling will be considered as a game. Why? Kasi there are rules within collegiate wrestling. Okay? In street fighting, wala. So, first, let's start. So, in street fighting, no? In a street fight, there are no rules. So, basically, ano man yung madampot mo dyan, if you have a weapon, you may use it. Okay? Dun sa kalaban mo. Okay? But, street fighting is against the law. So, there is not even a semblance of any rule in the activity. So, basically, lahat ng activities na ginagawa natin within street fighting is against the law. Okay? But, again, no, once na you're in that position, you're already within the street fight, there is no particular rules. You may use your fist, you may use your kahit ano na meron ka, or let's say nakakita ka ng bato dyan, you may do so. Okay? Why? Kasi it's either you kill or you survive pagdating dito sa mga ganitong klase ng scenario. So let's say ito nga, no, if one of the combatants can grab and use a weapon, he might be able to gain the upper hand or basically to win yung street fight. So whatever the physical circumstance of the environment, allow can happen in the street fight. So, ibig sabihin, anything can happen within the street fight, no? You can use anything that, alam mo yun, makikita mo dun sa surrounding in order for you to survive. Okay? So, as compared to collegiate wrestling, no? It is a very physical contest that can resemble a fight, but it is a game. Why? So, sabihin na natin, it's still a fight, yes, no? But, ano ba yung main difference nila? That will be the rules. Let's say, for example, in sabihin na natin, collegiate wrestling, are the participants allowed to use weapons? No. Okay? Why? Kasi merong rules na sinusundan doon. That will be the main difference between a street fight and a collegiate wrestling. Pagdating sa wrestling, there are rules. Okay? Hindi naman ito tulad ng sinasabi natin na to kill or to survive. Okay? So, there are rules. Okay? Tapos, meron tayong gustong ma-achieve within the game. So, we want to win. So, paano mo ba mapapanalo yun? It's either you can submit yung kalaban mo or mapalabas mo siya dun sa fighting area nyo. Okay? So, in this particular type of games, no, or let's say in collegiate wrestling, they are not allowed to punch each other even though they clearly have the means to do so. Ibig sabihin, they're capable of punching each other, no? But why? Okay, bakit hindi? Again, there is rules. So, first attribute natin before we can consider an activity will be the implementation of artificial rules. These rules should be agreed upon of all the participants of that game. Okay? So, let's say ito. We have the game chess and the rules. So, when two players sit down to play chess, the goal is for one player to capture all of his opponent's chess pieces. Okay? So, that will be the goal. Okay? Now, even though there is nothing physically stopping the player from simply reaching over to the other side of the board and grabbing his opponent's chess pieces, he's not allowed. Why? Because there is rules. There are rules that exist within a game. So if let's say for example, no, in chess, okay, the rules are basically we can use the chess pieces, okay, to let's say capture yung mga chess pieces ng kalaban natin. We're not allowed to grab them. Okay? So let's say for example, we start grabbing yung mga chess pieces ng kalaban mo without following the exact rules, then the game is already forfeited. Okay? Kasi one of the party or one of the participant, hindi na siya nag-follow ng rules. Again, no? So, forfeited na ngayon yung game. Only when players have followed the artificial rules of the game and one of them has created the circumstances to remove all chess pieces can the player be declared as the winner. Okay? There can only be a winner once na yung mga participants natin followed all the rules but one of them, okay, had the circumstances or had the chances or had the capability to remove all the chess pieces following yung mga rules. Okay? Then, he or she will be considered a winner. Again, no, if will not be following the rules, then the game will be forfeited. Next, if the rules of a game were not agreed upon, the game quickly break down and fail to function. Again, katulad nung sinabi natin kanina, artificial rules should be agreed upon both of or all of the parties involved within the game. So let's say for example in chess, there are two participants. Dapat agreed sila na kung ano yung alam ng isa na rules ng chess will have the same idea pagdating dun sa kalaban. Hindi naman pwede na ikaw ang alam mo na rules is for chess, yung kalaban mo ang alam na rules is for checkers or for dama or damat ang tawag ng iba, no? So hindi kayo makakapag-proceed dun sa makakapaglaro na maayos. Why? Because hindi kayo magkasundo dun sa rules na sinusundan nyo. If there is an established set of rules for a game and the player chooses to play the game, we can implicitly assume that the player has agreed to the all rules regardless of whether the player knows or understand them. So, once na pumayag ka to play that particular game, okay, so it's basically assumed that you already know the rules. So, once na meron kang hindi alam na rules and by playing the game, usually naman, sasabihin naman ng kalaban mo why? Kasi it's like cheating if you not be following the rules. So while all the attributes that make a game are important, the most important one is that a game has agreed upon artificial rules. Without this rule, there is no game. Again, katulad ng sinabi natin kanina, no? Playing a game not following the rules will forfeit yung game natin. Okay? So in order for us to have a game, yung mga participants natin should have an agreed upon artificial rules that they will be following once na nilaro nila yung game na yon. Next, so players have an impact on the outcome. So this attribute is actually slightly controversial. A small number of people believe that a game can be a game even if players have no impact on the game. So ano ba ang ibig sabihin nito, no? So when we say players have an impact on the outcome, ibig sabihin yung players natin will have a say or will have the capability to dictate what will be the outcome of the game. So, in this particular subject natin, we'll be setting na players should have an impact on the game. Kasi if your player will not have an impact on the game, basically kahit nandyan yung player na yan or wala yung player na yan, still, yung game will proceed and will still have the same outcome. Okay? So if a player does not have an impact on the game, he or she is not a player at all and the activity is not a game. Okay? So now let's proceed. So in here we have a sample game, no? So this is the game what we call Candyland. So players take turns drawing a card then moving an avatar along a linear track toward a goal. So is it a game? Okay, so tingnan natin, no? So pagdating dito sa game na to, okay, so the game can have at least 4 players. So, paano ba yon? So, in this particular game, no? So, you'll be voting kung sino si player number 1, player number 2, and so on and so forth. So, in here, we have these different tracks, okay? Each of these players, no, will have to draw a card. So, let's say for example, ikaw si player number 1, Okay, paano mo mamumove yung avatar mo or paano mo mamumove itong mga characters mo na to? So, this 4 characters represents yung mga players natin. So, paano mo mamove yan? You can move them by drawing a card. So, sa mga card na to, makikita nyo, let's say in this particular example, no, makikita nyo there is a color. Kung halimbawa, nag-draw ka ng card, okay, doon sa kulay na yon, pwede mong papuntahin yung avatar mo. Okay. Now, ang tanong ngayon, if that is the game mechanics, no, meron bang impact yung player dun sa game? So, check natin. According to the criteria, we are putting forth that a player must have an impact of the game. In this particular scenario, it's not. Why? Kasi basically, kahit isa lang yung player na maglaro dito sa 4 na to, same lang din yung magiging process. Okay? Yung player will not have an impact. Bakit? Kasi wala namang skill na nire-require dito. Okay? Ang nire-require lang dito is more on luck. So, ibig sabihin, 4 man yung player na naglalaro dito sa game na to, or isa lang yung naglalaro sa player na to. Halimbawa, isang player lang, no, parang siya yung naglalaro doon sa 4, no. The game will still proceed. The game most probably will still have the same process. Okay? So, ngayon, kung mag-isa ka, pwede mo bang dayain yung game na sabihin na natin na, or ano ba yung pwede mong gawin para mapapanalo mo yung isa, yung gusto mong mapapanalo? Wala kang magagawa. Why? Kasi you're drawing cards. Cards are random. So basically, we're just basing on luck pagdating dito. Okay? Hindi siya katulad ng ibang games na kapag isang tao lang yung naglaro, pwede mong piliin sino yung mananalo or sino yung matatalo. Okay? So, ano ba yung example ng game na yon? So, let's say for example, no, let's just consider chess. Let's say for example, sa isang chess, isang player lang yung naglalaro. So, sabi natin kanina, in Candyland, merong 4 na players. Kung isa lang ang maglalaro doon, hindi niya pwedeng sabihin, papanalunin yung isa. Kasi nga random yung colors na matudraw niya from the cards. In this particular scenario, let's say in chess, kung isang tao lang yung naglalaro ng chess, okay, pwede siyang maging bias doon sa isang side para mapapanalo niya. Okay. Why? Ano ba yung main difference doon sa mechanics nila? The difference in mechanics is in chess, walang luck na involved. Okay? We're dependent more on the skills. So, ibig sabihin, kung mas magaling yung isa, siya yung mananalo, di ba? So, in this particular scenario, kung isang player lang yung naglalaro ng chess, okay, pwede siya maging bias doon sa isa. Pwede niya ipakain lahat ng chess pieces sa kabila para matapos yung game and para manalo siya. So, merong impact yung player in this type of game as compared dun sa kanina. Okay? Kasi kanina, whether we play the game with 4 players or we play the game with 1 player, same lang yung magiging procedure ng game. Okay? Most probably, same lang din yung magiging output kasi magiging random yung colors. Pagdating dito, hindi. Magiging bias ka sa isa para matapos yung game. Okay? So, merong involved na skill. Yung player, okay, can have an impact dun sa game. Pwede niyang i-dictate kung paano mananalo or paano matatapos yung game. So, before an activity is considered to be a game, no, yung mga players should have an impact on the outcome. So, pwede nilang ma-dictate kung ano yung magiging outcome ng game depende dun sa skill na kaya nilang i-provide dun sa game. Okay? So, it will be more on the skill. Kung ang pinag-uusapan natin sa isang game is more on luck, most probably the players will have an impact on the outcome pagdating sa ganung klase ng games, no? So, let's proceed. So, people can opt out. So, let's say, for example, if a person is walking with a basketball and someone calls out, that's traveling. Okay? You must be dribbling with the ball while you walk. So, what if nandun ka lang sa park, papunta ka pa lang sa basketball court, dala-dala mo yung bola na ganyan. Kailangan ba dinidribble mo na yung bola habang naglalakad ka papunta sa basketball court? No, kasi hindi ka pa naman naglalaro eh. So, basically, the concept in here is players, okay, can opt out or may consider not playing the game. Pwede silang mag-continue na hindi na laruin yung game. Okay? So, let's say, this basically means na your players, dapat hindi sila mandatory to play the game. They have the options to play the game or not to play the game. So, sabi nga dito, this is perfectly fine. people are never obliged to play a game. So ano bang ibig sabihin ng obliged? O ibig sabihin hindi sila obligado na laruin yung game. People may opt out. Pwede sabihin ng player na ayoko na maglaro. Okay? So kasi kapag again no katulad nung sa kanina, yung agreed upon, kung hindi naman nag-agree all of the parties, hindi tayo pwede mag-proceed dun sa isang game. Katulad lang yan nandito. Kung halimbawa, ayaw mong sundin yung rules, you may opt out not to play. Okay? Next, game sessions are finite. So ano ba ang ibig sabihin ng finite? Kapag sinabi nating finite, it's just limited. Okay? So a game must have some form of ending so that the participants are sometimes playing the game but not always playing the game. Okay? So kapag sinabi natin game sessions are finite, ibig sabihin, yung mga games natin will have certain amount of duration for them to play the game. Either to finish the game or to play the game or and stop the game. Okay? Kasi there are games na walang katapusan like MMORPG or MMO games. So kapag sinabi nating MMO games, massively multiplayer online game, or kapag sinabi nating MMORPG is massively multiplayer online role-playing game. So pagdating dun sa mga MMORPG, wala kasing yan. Wala silang katapusan in playing. But hindi naman ibig sabihin na kung walang katapusan yung game is non-stop na yung paglalaro. Okay? So, the players, pwedeng halimbawa, mag-grind ako ng 3 hours. Okay? Tapos, mag-stop ako. So, we can already consider it as a game session. Technically, yung duration ng game, wala siyang ending. Okay? Pero yung session ng paglalaro mo should be finite. Why? Sino ba sa atin kaya maglaro ng 24/7, 3 months straight? 24/7, 6 years straight. Wala naman. So, our gaming time will be divided dun sa tinatawag natin na gaming sessions. Itong gaming sessions na to, finite lang yung duration niyan. Kasi, again, no, wala naman sa ating kaya maglaro ng 24/7 for 6 years straight. Kasi kung hindi finite, or kapag ang game sessions natin are infinite, ibig sabihin, non-stop straight, maglalaro yan. Hindi mo naman kaya yun. Okay? So, siguro you can play 24/7. Sabihin nila 24 hours hanggang 1 week, but most probably after that week, patay ka na. Okay? So, in terms of games, game sessions are finite. Yung games natin should be designed to have sessions. Okay? So, let's say for example, naglaro ka ng Dota 1, okay? Or naglaro ka ng Dota 2. Kapag na-destroy nyo yung structure, that is already considered a session. Pagdating dun sa mga MMORPG, kapag nag-log out ka, then or nag-log in ka, naglaro ka for a few hours, then nag-log out ka, then that's already considered as a game session. Okay, so next, we have intrinsic rewards. So one of the aspect that distinguishes games is intrinsic rewards. That is reward that will only have value within the game. So let's say for example, when you play chess, it is valuable to capture an opponent's pieces. However, that captured checker holds no value outside the game. Kapag sinabi nating intrinsic rewards, okay, ito yung mga rewards na nakukuha natin dun sa game. Okay, so sabi nga kanina dun sa previous slide natin, no, intrinsic reward and intrinsic rewards that have no extrinsic value. So, ibig sabihin, rewards yan nakukuha mo dun sa game, pero walang value yan outside the game. Okay? So, let's say for example, I believe this game is yung Clash Royale rewards. Kung halimbawa, nakakuha ka dito ng epic card. Okay, yung epic card na yon, pwede mo bang gamitin outside the game? Pwede mo bang ipambili yan dun sa ibang game? No. Dun lang yan within the game na nilalaro mo. Okay? Halimbawa, nakapulot ka ng, sabihin na natin dito, ano ba to? Resource card. Yung resource card na yan, pwede mo bang gamitin sa ibang game? No. Intrinsic reward. Okay? Yung reward na yon will only have a value within the game. Kapag nilabas mo, yung sabihin na natin, yung reward na yon outside the game, it won't hold a value. So let's say for example, yung gold dito, kapag nilabas mo sa game yan, it's just a text. Hindi naman yan mabibilang as sabihin na natin as gold sa labas. Sa labas ng game na to. Okay? So, let's say, for example, SLP. rewards naman yun sa mga games, no? Can we consider SLP as intrinsic rewards? Yes. Intrinsic reward siya, pero meron siyang extrinsic value. Meron siyang value sa labas ng game. Pwede mo siyang i-trade. Ngayon, di ba, pwede mo naman ipambili yung SLP. Okay? So, kung susundin natin itong mga, tawag dito, itong mga attributes na to, yung, most probably, yung Axie will not be considered as really a game. Okay? Kasi, alam mo yon, there are certain attributes na sinusundan natin dito. Yung mga rewards na nakukuha natin dun sa mga casual games na nilalaro natin wouldn't have extrinsic rewards or extrinsic values outside the game. So, at the end of the game, or in the play checkers, or chess, yung mga pieces natin, wala naman silang value outside the game. So, even though na makuha mo lahat ng chess pieces ng 100 katao, it won't matter dun sa next game mo. Hindi naman siya kasamang binibilang. Okay, so kapag sinabi natin intrinsic rewards, these are rewards that nakukuha natin within the game but won't have an extrinsic value or won't have values outside the game. Next. So the next topic natin, guys, no, for this module will be finding the target audience of a game. So first, is it important to consider who you are making a game for? Who will be the game player? So, is it important? Yes. Okay? So, first, before creating a game, dapat meron ka target na audience or meron ka mga target na player. So, let's say for example, if you'll be creating a really complex game that requires the player to perform complex mathematical equations, pwede ba nating i-target yung audience doon para doon sa game na yon na yung audience mo is, sabihin na natin, 3 to 5 years old? Pwede ba? No, of course no. 3 to 5 years old won't have the capability to perform complex computation. Ang kaya lang niyan, we can assume ang kaya lang ng mga yan is yung mga simple arithmetic. So kung magdi-design ka ng game para doon sa mga 3 to 5 years old na ang requirements mo sa paglalaro ng game nila is mag-compute sila ng complex mathematical equations, then mali yung target audience mo. Yung mga tina-target audience mo should be at least adults. Kasi we can consider adults are already capable of performing complex mathematical equations, particularly kung nakapag-aral sila. Okay? So, next is what is a game player? It could be argued that literally everyone in the world is either a current or former game player. So, most people enjoy and sometimes play some sort of games. Okay, so kapag sinabi nating player, anyone in the world can be considered as a game player. So, sir, can we consider yung mga bata as game players? Yes, as long as they are able to understand the rules or they are able to perform yung activities or skills na nire-require ng game. So, meron namang game sabihin na natin na kayang laruin ng mga 3 years old. So, they could be considered as game player. So, ang tanong ngayon, halimbawa, sir, can we consider yung mga 1-year-old to be game player? Ang tanong is, can they perform yung mga skills na nire-require sa game? Most probably, hindi pa nila. So, we can't consider them. So, anyone na kaya ng, alam mo yun, could already understand the rules. Okay, kahit di marunong magbasa yan, basta it could already understand the rules, can already perform the skills na nire-require ng game, or in terms of video games, if they are already able to, or they are already capable to control yung controls na gagamitin for the game. Let's say, if it's a computer, they'll be able to use the keyboard and the mouse, or if naka-mobile phone, controlling yung screen, then we can consider them as game players already. Next, to define your target audience, you can think about various attributes. So, these attributes of game players run the gamut from demographic characteristics to attitudes and behavior. So, ang ibig sabihin lang nito is basically, there are different types of attributes that these game players will have. Okay? So, pwede nating i-categorize yung mga players natin based on different types of demographics, based on different types of attitudes. So, later on, we'll be discussing kung ano ba yung iba't ibang attributes na yun or characteristics ng ating mga game players. So, don't try to define the audience you want to play the game. You want everyone to play it. So, instead, define the audience for which you are making the game. Okay, so ang ibig sabihin lang nito is before you proceed dun sa pagkikreate ng game, no, there should be a target audience. Okay? Pero mas maganda if you can target as much as audience, mas maganda. Why? Kasi kung yung game mo is paid or binabayaran or binibili, mas marami kang players na tina-target, mas malaki yung possible na income mo. 'Di ba? That's it. So, let's say for example, some players won't play games that have sessions that last longer than a few minutes. Other players won't play games whose sessions are less than an hour. So, pagdating kasi dito sa mga games na to, we have different types of preferences. Okay, yung iba, ang gusto nilang type of games are like MOBAs na pwede mong laruin from around 15 minutes to 1 hour. Okay? So, yung iba naman, gusto nila yung talagang grinding talaga ng experience, grinding ng items, no? We have different types of preferences pagdating sa games. Ako, previously, I used to like MMORPGs. Gusto kasi yung palakasan, pagandahan ng item, no? Di bali mag-grind na mag-grind. That will be my preference. Every one of us will have preference pagdating dun sa mga games natin. Okay, so for me, naglalaro lang ako ng casual games kapag naiinip ako. After, kapag di na ako naiinip or may ginagawa na ako, then I stop it. Okay? If gusto ko na mabilisan na laro, I just play MOBAs. Something like that. Pero if I want to be playing a long session, no, most probably I will be opting with MMORPGs. Okay? So something like that. Next, these are the different type of the attributes or characteristics or yung ating tinatawag na attributes ng ating audience. Kapag sinabi natin target audience, ito po yung mga target players natin, no? So the first attribute that we have is age. So age can most effectively be split into two major groups. That will be adults and developing children. Kapag sinabi natin developing children, we're usually referring dun sa mga, alam mo yun, mga bata. So, mga kids games, yung mga casual games, yan, etc., etc. So, as children develop cognitive skills, they do so by age. So, ibig sabihin, no, if you're designing a game that will require, katulad ng in-example ko kanina, that will require performing complex mathematical computation of complex mathematical equations, so you can consider yung mga developing children as your target audience. So, yung grade 6, kaya na ba yun? I don't think so. So, you should assume na yung targets mo will be adults. Okay? So, games made for developing children have specific requirements and face legal restrictions. So, ito, usually, no, if you're someone na, sabihin na natin, if you know someone na within my age group, no, kapag bumibili kami ng mga CDs dati for PlayStation, Xboxes, no, makikita mo yung mga CDs na yun will have this label sa likod. So, itong mga labels na to, ito yung tinatawag natin na ESRB rating symbols or the Entertainment Software Rating Board. Okay? Symbols. So, ano ba yung mga symbols na yan? Ito yung mga symbols na makikita nyo dun sa mga game nyo kung sino ba yung mga targeted audience ng mga games na to. Okay? So, let's say for example, no, sabihin na natin God of War. So, early childhood ba yan? No. Kasi meron mga graphic content doon. Okay? Meron mga violence or violent act na makikita doon sa game na yon. So, most probably, yung mga ganong klaseng type of games will be for mature 17 plus or adults 18 and plus. Okay? So, these are basically different types of categorizations, no? Kung para saan or para kanino yung mga games na nakikita natin or nalalaro natin. So, there are entire fields devoted to child development and making learning activities or games for children at different stages of development. So, basically, kung magde-design kayo ng game para sa mga children, it is best na mag-research kayo. Ano ba yung different stages of development? Ano bang klaseng skills meron yung mga children at this particular age? So, pinakamaganda, no, you research into the field of child development para mai-align mo kung ano ba yung skills na meron na yung mga children at this particular age and ano yung mga requirements na hihingin mo para dun sa game na gagawin mo for them to play it. Okay? So, kumbaga, the contents ng game mo should match the target age group mo. Okay? So, halimbawa, itong mga ganitong klaseng game, no? Sa graphics pa lang makikita mo usually, these are, sabihin na natin, no, targeted for developing children, okay? Based on sa graphics. Kasi makikita nyo parang cute yung mga graphics natin dito. Parang mga chibi yung mga characters natin. These characters or this type of graphics are usually appealing dun sa mga developing children. Okay? So, usually sa graphics pa lang makikita nyo naman yan. Next, on the other hand, no, adults can be grouped into one large pool for the sake of game development. So, kapag sinabi nating adults, that is usually 18 years old and above. So, we can simply assume na itong mga adults na to are able to read and to use the controllers na meron yung mga games nyo. So, let's say for example, you'll be creating a game for the desktop platform or para sa computer platform. Okay? So, we can already assume na itong mga adults na to are already able or already capable of controlling the mouse and the keyboard, pati yung mga joystick, yung mga controllers na meron tayo. So, basically, pagdating dun sa age group, yung adults, sama-sama na lang sila. Okay? Next, tolerance for learning rules. So, many people hate learning new rules. Okay? So, there are some people na once na nakasanayan na nila itong ganitong klase ng genre ng game, hindi na sila nagja-jump doon sa ibang genre ng game kasi they don't want to learn new rules. They just want to play new games without, alam yun, learning a new set of rules. So, example na lang, no? Hand someone a thick rule book and ask him or her to read it. Many people would think this sounds awful. Okay? So, these people often decide it is not worth the effort to play any new games. So, kumbaga, meron tayong tinatawag na parang learning curve. Kapag ang learning curve, ibig sabihin, napakadali lang, let's say you're jumping from Dota 1 to Dota 2, halos same rules lang yun. Okay? In a few sessions, you'll be able to adapt kung paano laruin yun. Okay? Kung halimbawa, nasanay ka na dun sa MOBA. But, let's say for example, you're someone na very familiar or an enthusiast of MOBA games, tapos palalaruin ka bigla ng games na outside of your genre, mahirap mag-adjust. So, people usually don't tend to play itong mga games na merong new rules na to. Okay? So, think of people who play chess on a daily basis but no other games. And there are certainly gamers, but they are not the same kind of gamer who picks up a new game weekly just to give it a try. Okay? So, again, no, there is a learning curve pagdating dito sa mga games. Kapag sinabi nating learning curve, ano ba yung mga dapat mong aralin in order for you to adapt dun sa game na yun? Kung masyadong marami or it's basically a whole new set of rules, mahirap mag-adjust. Okay? Nakakatamad mag-adjust. Eh. Why not stick na lang dun sa mga game na nilalaro mo na previously? Okay? So, something like that, no? So, let's say for example, there are certain players na they want to play a certain genre. They just want to play the MOBA game or the FPS game. Okay? On the other hand, there are certain players na gusto mag-jump ng games. Let's say, kapag may na-release na game, bibili na agad yan, lalaruin. After a week, sawa na, hindi man natapos, jump ulit sa game na yan. Jump sa ibang game na. Okay? There are different types of people pagdating dito sa tolerance for learning. If you're a type of player na very tolerant dun sa pagdating sa learning ng mga new rules, then it's good for you. But not all players will have this tolerance level. Katulad nga ng sinabi ko, yung ibang players, more on very short yung tolerance nila pagdating dun sa learning curve. Okay? So let's say for me, no, if you'll be asking me what particular genre of game na nilalaro ko, it's either MOBA or MMORPG. Yan yung mga usually na nilalaro ko. Ano yung mga type of games na ayoko? Board games. Okay? So, kung walang PK or player kill, usually hindi ako na-attract dun sa game. What I want pagdating dun sa game will be player kills, particularly in MMORPG. So, if you'll be offering me to play a game or MMORPG na walang player kill, most probably I won't be playing yung game na yon. Okay, so now let's proceed. Let's say ito. People basically fall into 5 groups when it comes to tolerance for learning rules. So, the first example natin or the first type natin or first group natin will be refusing. So, these players or players in this group all but refuse to learn new rules. If you're making a game for this group, it is almost certainly a game based on real-world game, or is it a sequel to an existing game, or at least it fits tightly into a very specific genre. So, let's say for example, ito. This is the game na tinatawag natin na Wii Bowling. Okay, so dito sa Wii Bowling na to, it's targeted para dito sa mga players na refusing new rules. Okay, why? If you're already familiar with playing bowling, most probably, ikaw lang yung type ng player na ma-engganyo maglaro nito. Okay, if you'll be asking me, bowling ba is an appealing game to me? No. Hindi man ako marunong mag-bowling. Usually, I'll just try that for a few sessions, then hindi na. Okay? So, again, no, these are the refusing group. Maglalaro at maglalaro lang yan if they are already familiar with the rules. If they're not familiar with the rules, then hindi nila lalaruin yung game nyo. Okay? Next, we have resistant. So, in this particular group, players do not like learning new rules, but they will do occasionally so that they can play a specific game. So, players in this group tend to stick to a very small variety of games or possibly a narrow genre. They tend not to explore new titles or new games beyond what they already know. So, designing games for these people is easy. If you're doing something that would be familiar to them, it takes very little ramp up. However, members of this group are nearly impossible to reach if you are doing something unique or well outside their comfort range. Pagdating na dito sa mga resistant na to, no, these are the type of players that only plays games within a single genre. So, kapag sinabi nating MOBA, maglalaro yan MOBA. So, siguro sabihin na natin, magja-jump yan ng Dota 1, magja-jump yan ng Dota 2, or baka maglaro yan ng LOL. Kapag halimbawa, gusto nila ng mabilisang game, lalaro yan ng mga MOBA sa cellphone. Like Mobile Legends. Pero kung palalaruin mo yan ng mga MMORPG, I doubt na maglalaro sila. Why? Alam mo yun, very different kasi yung mechanics pagdating sa MOBA and MMORPGs. Why? Kung ikaw yung type ng tao na medyo mainipin sa farming, okay, you're not for MMORPGs. So, kapag sa MOBA, kapag tinatawag nila yung mga magsasaka, farming sila for 30 minutes, wala pa yan. Pagdating sa MMORPG, ang farming, let's say farming experience, will take weeks, will take months. So, ano pang tawag dun sa mga yun, no? So, pagdating dito sa mga resistant players na to, guys, no? It's basically, they will play games within the genre that they love. Yun lang yun. If you'll be introducing a game sa kanila na outside their genre, most probably hindi nila lalaruin. Okay, so, for the continuation, think of the match 3 genre of games like yung Bejeweled. Many players play only this genre because it's easy to learn and play and is available on a convenient device such as a smartphone. So if you wanted to make a new twist on the match 3 game, this group might be open to giving your game a chance. So kapag sinabi nating match 3 games, no, ibig sabihin ito yung mga type of games na kapag halimbawa meron mga gems dito na nagkakatatabi-tabi na pare-pareho ng kulay, you'll be able to score. Usually, ito yung mga tinatawag natin na casual gamers. So, sino ba naglalaro ng madalas ng mga casual gamers na yan? Yung mga talagang sabihin na natin nagpapalipas na ng oras. Ito mga type of player na to, again, no, hindi mo sila mapapalaro ng mga MMORPG na kailangan nila mag-farm for months. No. Wala silang ganong tiyaga to play those type of games. Kaya nga sila naglalaro ng casual games, pwede silang maglaro anytime na gusto nila, pwede nilang itigil anytime na gusto nila, and walang magiging consequences yun. Next, the third group that we have is the neutral players. So players in this group are fine with learning new rules. If it is for the specific purpose of playing a new game, many casual video game players and board game players fall into this category. So this group is likely to read or understand all the rules. Instead, they learn as they go and they may be interested in only the rules that are needed to play the game. So pagdating dito sa mga neutral na to, no, again, no, they are not resistant, but they are open to learning new rules. So let's say for example, sabihin na natin if you're the type of player na usually naglalaro dati sa mga computer shop, no? So let's say if you're playing Counter-Strike at inintroduce nila sa iyo yung Dota, most probably you'll be open pagdating dito sa neutral type ng mga players natin, no? So, pagdating dito, let's say you'll be playing this different type of games, you won't be reading all the instructions how to play this game. Most probably, these are the type of players na they will try to play the game, feel the game habang nilalaro nila. These are not the type of players na aaralin muna yung game before proceeding in playing the actual game. Okay? So, these are neutral. So, pagdating dito, no, they learn as they go. So, they may be interested in only the rules that are needed to play in the game. Neutral players in these groups are kinds of players who follow specific franchises by each new installment of those games. They are also likely to buy similar competitors within the same game genre, or they are unlikely to wander outside their preferred genre or something completely. Again, no, this is tawag dito katulad almost the same with the resistant. Okay? But etong mga neutral players na to, they are more open. So let's say for example, pagdating dun sa mga FPS games, there are different types of implementation for FPS games. Merong Counter-Strike, merong COD, okay, etc. etc. So usually ano ba ang main difference, no? Pagdating sa Counter-Strike, ano ba meron? It's usually deathmatch. Pagdating doon. If you'll be playing Call of Duty, it's more on based on missions. Or yes, mga missions. So if you'll be considering, no, same lang yung mechanics nila, barilan, or shooting, no? But the way how you're playing and finishing the game, medyo magkaiba ng konti. Pagdating dito sa mga resistant, even though na pareho ng shooting yan, they won't be playing yung mga missions kung ang gusto lang nila is mga deathmatch. Something like that. But if itong mga players fall under neutral, basta they have the almost the same mechanics, shooting, whether nagka-campaign ka, nagmi-mission ka, or nagde-deathmatch ka lang, lalaruin nila to. Kasi, alam mo yun, hindi ka pa rin lumalabas dun sa nakasanayan mong game. It still is shooting, but it's a different implementation. So, pagdating dun sa mga neutral, they usually follow the same franchise or the same mechanics pagdating dun sa mga games. Next, we have accepting. So, players in this group like learning new games and new rules. So, they often learn more rules than the bare minimum needed to play. They sometimes seek out rules exploit and use them to their advantage. So, pagdating dito sa accepting na to, no, kahit anong game yung ibigay mo sa kanila, lalaruin nila yan. Okay? As long as the game is appealing para sa kanila. These are the type of players na walang actual preference in terms of games. Ang gusto lang nila is they'll be able to play the game, they be entertained pagdating dito sa game na to. So pagdating dito sa accepting players, no, they are most likely to seek out daw yung mga rules exploit. So ano nga ba yung mga rules exploit na to? These are basically para mga cheese strategies. So, ano ba itong mga cheese strategies na to? Cheese strategies are basically yung mga imbalance strategies na ina-allow dun sa game. So, medyo madaya sila ng konti in terms of playing the game, no? Pero hindi naman siya binabawal na gamitin within the game. So, this could be bugs na pwedeng exploit within the game. So, these are the usual characteristics of accepting players. So, yung exploits na to, ayan, so some of you will be familiar dun sa mga fountain hooks. Ayan siya. This is an example of rules exploit. So, basically, hindi naman yan bawal within the game, no? But, alam nyo yun, it's a cheese strategy, kaya pinatch din siya, inalis din. Continuation. So, this group is likely to have a favorite genre and stick to it mostly, but also explore other genres. So, the accepting category is a significant market and makes up a good share of professional game developers' target market. So, this is the group that is most targeted and valued by the gaming industry. And accepting players are often flooded with a variety of games made for them. So, kapag sinabi natin accepting, no, these are the type of players na bigyan mo ng laro, katulad ng Counter-Strike, lalaroin nila. Gusto nila na, yayain mo silang mag-MOBA, lalaruin din nila. They're very accepting. Yayain mo silang maglaro ng mga MMORPGs, yes, lalaruin din nila. So, pagdating dito sa mga type of players na to, ito yung pinakamadali. Kasi kahit anong game yung ibato mo sa kanila, as long as the game is interesting, lalaruin at lalaruin nila yung game na yun. Next, this is the last one. We have enthusiast. So, player in this group love to learn new rules. They often jump from game to game and many of them drop a game as soon as they figure out the rules completely. So, while it is easy to get rules enthusiast to play your new game, it is hard to hold on that player. So, pagdating dito sa type of games or type of players na to, very ano lang to, tawag dito, napaka-konti lang itong mga ganitong klase ng players na once they already familiarize the game, nagsasawa na agad sila. They want new type of games na meron silang pwedeng aralin. Okay? Pwede silang i-experiment. These are the type of enthusiast players. Hindi mo silang mapapastick dun sa isang game. Once na na-master na nila yung game, nagsasawa na agad sila. Okay? So, pagdating dito sa 5 categories na to, ito yung merong pinaka smallest na sabihin na natin number. Okay. Next. Next attribute natin for our audience or our players will be the interest and challenge. So there are many varieties of challenges, but we can simply simplify this attribute to tolerance for failure. So most games have mechanics that allow the player to both succeed and fail. Okay. So ano ba yung mga challenges? So ano ba yung tolerance level mo in terms of the number of failures na kailangan mong i-attempt in order for you to, sabihin na natin, to succeed into a game. So, let's say, for example, ito. Sabihin na natin ito yung extra or super hard pagdating sa Super Mario. I believe this is just a mod ng Super Mario, no? If you'll be asking me, hindi ganito kataas yung tolerance level ko in terms of play. Baka in the first few steps pa lang, nag-give up na ako pagdating dito sa game na to. So, there are certain players na gusto nila, mas mahirap yung game, mas appealing para sa kanila. Okay? There are also other players na gusto nila mas madali yung game. Kasi, alam mo yun, they can already, mabilis nilang ma-feel yung satisfaction kasi mabilis nilang natatapos yung game. Pero merong ibang players na mga naiinip kapag masyadong madali yung game. Again, no, these are the preferences that players will have in terms of selecting the game na gusto nilang laruin. So, when we say tolerance for failure, we can simply quantifiably measure it by the frequency of success versus failure and use it as a metrics that define yung challenge. Okay, so, gaano kahirap ba yan? Sabihin natin, in 10 trials, on average, how many times mo pwede siyang matapos? If it's every 10 trials, meron kang 1 success rate, I believe medyo mababa yun. That's 10%. Okay? But it's still up to you. It's still up to us players. Ano ba yung level of tolerance natin? So, to some players, failure is almost or even completely unacceptable. They want constant rewards and they play games simply to feel good or pass time and not for challenge. So, ito yung mga type of players na mainipin. So, yung tipong nahirapan sila, wala na, tigil na natin yung game. Tama na yan. Hanap na ako ng ibang lalaroin. But there are certain players na hindi mo titigilan hanggat hindi mo na-accomplish yung gusto mo mangyari. So, it is possible to quantify this aspect by listing the accepted failure level as a simple ratio of the number of failures to the number of successes. Pagdating dito sa challenges na to or yung ating tolerance and failure, it's a good example itong chart na to. This is a sample chart ng ating Ragnarok mobile upgrade success rate table. So, ano ba to? So, let's say you're enhancing or nagpa-plus ka ng items mo. Ano ba yung success rate? Yan, makikita nyo yan dito. Let's say, if you're enhancing a level 1 weapon, yan, i-enhance mo yan to plus 10, ang chances mo lang is nasa 30%. Okay? This is one of the type of games that will be implementing yung upgrading or enhancing. So, if you're the type of person na ayaw mag-grind, okay, this game is not for you. So, there are certain people na ang gusto mangyari is yung pag-enhance ng item, yung pag-create ng items is very challenging. Why? Kasi habang mas nagiging challenging yan, mas nagiging fulfilling once na natapos mo or na-achieve mo. Okay? There are also certain players na gusto nila yung merong mababang success rate para once na na-achieve nila, sila lang yung nakagawa or sila lang yung meron. Let's say for example, nag-enhance sila ng item. Gusto nila sila lang yung naka-plus 10 lahat ng item. Most probably, they want na mababa yung success rate. Okay? So, again, no, it all boils down to the preferences that we want dun sa game natin. Na game na pala na gusto nating laruin. Are we the type of casual players na nagpapalipas na ng oras? Or are we the hardcore players na as in gusto ma-achieve lahat not in the easiest way but in the hardest way para magkaroon ng mas magandang fulfillment in themselves, no? So, consider these two dramatically different scenarios. Itong two na to, these are not examples of the percentages, no? The percentage will come in different numbers. This is just an example. So, let's say ito, 15/1. This notation indicates that an expected 15 failures for every one success. Okay? So, for every 15 failures, meron kang 1 success. I believe that will be an average. Okay? So, kumbaga, if you'll be asking me, ano ba yan? Is it easy or hard or hell? Siguro, nasa ano lang to, mga nasa hard level lang ito, something. So, this is a very challenging daw, but again, no, it's all in the preferences. So, it is challenging so that it will likely drive away many players, but it will attract a small devoted following. So, kumbaga, yung mga players na gustong hardcore yung paglalaro, ayan, pwede sa kanila to. The second one is 1/100. This notation indicates an expected failure, 1 failure for every 1 successes. So, these are usually type of games na para dun sa mga casual players na gusto lang magpasipat ng oras. Ayaw na i-stress dun sa nilalaro nila. Gusto nila every time they're playing, nananalo sila. Every time they're playing, natatapos nila yung game. So, these are these are just two examples of dramatically different scenarios pagdating dun sa difficulty ng game. Okay, we're just quantifying it dun sa number of successes versus dun sa number of failures. Kung halimbawa, sabihin na natin na you'll be developing a game na merong easy, medium, and hard, pwede nyo sigurong gamitan itong mga numbers na to. Okay, let's say for example, sabihin na natin, no, yung easy mo, ang success rate niya is nasa 100%. Kahit hindi marunong yung player, kaya niyan tapusin. Yung hard ng success rate niya, gawin mong 10% to 20%. Something like that. We can define yung difficulty nung game na lalaro nyo or na i-develop nyo pala based on the scenarios. The next one is desired time investment. So, desired time investment can be broken into subcategories. That would be session time and total time. So, some games such as checkers don't have a total time, only a session time. So, kapag sinabi natin session time, we usually refer dun sa per game. Gaano katagal yan. Okay? Kapag sinabi natin total time, ano yung total duration para malaro mo at matapos itong game na to. Okay? Some games will have session time and some will have total time. Kapag sinabi natin session time and total time, it's not necessarily na parang you'll be providing the number of seconds of the number of minutes. Okay, kumbaga, what is the estimated na play time for this session and for the total time? Mostly, these are just estimations. So, let's say, for example, session time. So, it is how long it takes to play a standalone session of a game or in a longer video game to have what the player would consider as a satisfying session. So, let's say, for example, ito, volleyball is a well-divided game. It consists of points that make up a set and set which make up a match. So, kapag sinabi natin session time, no, we can just refer dun sa number of points and number of sets that make up a match for this particular example. Halimbawa, sa volleyball, so ano ba yung mga considerations natin in terms of time? Sa volleyball, wala naman yung parang game time katulad ng sa basketball. Okay? But paano ba natatapos yung game? Via scores. So, eto, we have a sample dito, yung set score and yung score within a set, no? So, sabihin na natin, if you'll be playing volleyball, sabihin natin, ang total time or yung session time natin is 5 sets. So, how many points ba yon? meron per set. So sabihin na natin, it's 21 points per set. Okay? So 1 set is equivalent to, or 21 points is equivalent to 1 set. Okay? Then yung game is, it consists of 5 sets. So that will be considered as your session time. Okay? So, it is divided into session. Again, katulad ng sinabi natin, yung time na binabanggit natin in session, no, it doesn't necessarily mean na it's an actual minutes or hours on how long to play the game. It's usually just an estimation, or it could be a different type of metrics aside from time. It could be a metrics of score. Okay? Next, we have the total time. So it is the amount of time it takes to complete a game, which can be different for different type of games. So some games are never completed. So think of MMORPGs or match 3 games or other older arcade games. So pagdating dito sa total time na to, this is usually the type of games na merong predefined number of time. Halimbawa, basketball. Naka-set lang yan sa certain minutes. Gano'n mo siya katagal lalaroin. Yung volleyball kanina, ang metrics na ginagamit natin is score. Okay? Pagdating dito sa total time, no, pwedeng yung mismong minutes, pwedeng yung mismong hours. Okay? But it doesn't necessarily mean na kailangan eksakto-eksakto yan. Pwede mong i-define na eksakto-eksakto or you can define it as an estimation. Let's say, for example, ito sa, ano ba to? Virtual 3 Lightning. Dito sa game na to, each game, meron kang countdown na 60 seconds. So, you can consider na per game, that will be a total time of 60 seconds. Kasi dinefine niya dun sa game na it's just 60 seconds. So, if you'll be the designer, it's up to you. Do you want to use a total time? Pagdating sa total time, do you want it to be an exact number or do you want it to be an estimation? Okay? Or, pwede natin gamitin yung session time. So, yung session time, again, no, it doesn't necessarily mean na mismong oras yun. We can use metrics, other metrics pagdating sa session time. In terms of volleyball, that will be yung scores and sets. So, each of these time investment subcategories, you need to define what you expect out of the game and what the audience want. So, kumbaga, kung ano man yung ilalagay mo na session time or total time, dapat it is within reasonable bounds. So kung ano yung gusto mong mangyari dun sa game, dapat yung mga players mo will be able to perform dun sa game na yon given yung sinet mo na oras. Okay? So wag kang gagawa ng game na tipong magbibigay ka lang ng 5 seconds na total duration tapos yung mga players, ang ine-expect mo sa kanila is sabihin na natin mag-compute na napakahaba equation. Malabo yon. Okay? So, some players want a quick 5-minute session with no endgame. So, casual mobile games will suit this audience. Or, other player wants 2 hours long session with 20-hour completion time. So, many action-adventure games appeal to this group. So, you need to define sino ba yung mga target mo muna na audience. Then, saka mo pwedeng i-define ngayon yung target time investment mo. Okay? So, gaano mo ba katagal gustong iset yung game? It will depend on the audience or dun sa mga players mo. Next, the following are examples of how you might quantify desired time investment for various type of games. So, if checkers yan, so that will be a 10-minute session, no total time. If you're playing poker, so that will be 3-hour session, no total time. If halimbawa, Skyrim video game is a 2-hour session, okay? So, kumbaga, you'll be playing 2 hours straight and for the total completion time, it's around 1 hour, 100 hour. So, this is just an estimation, no? Kasi, depende pa rin naman sa performance mo yun sa game, kung magaling ka ba sa game or hindi. So, let's say, for example, Mario Kart, it's a 15-minute session with 50-hour total time to unlock every reward. Okay, so these are just examples of our, time investment for various type of games, no? Katulad ng sinabi ko kanina, these are possibly just estimations or pwedeng naka-define sa mismong game mo. Nasa sa inyo yun kung paano nyo siya gagawin. Next, we have pace preference. So, the pace of a game is difficult to quantify but is important to players. So, you should consider multiple factors related to this pace. So, ano ba ibig sabihin ng pace? Okay. For example, a game of speed chess is fast-paced but it but is it fast in a different way than a shoot 'em up top-down shooter is? So let's say for example, no, ang pace usually refers gaano kabilis yung progression ng mga actions within the game. So if we'll be considering, let's just compare regular na chess as compared sa mga FPS games. So sabihin na natin yung mga FPS games will be Counter-Strike, etc. etc. No? So, alin ba yung mas mabilis yung progression ng mga activities? Is it chess or sa FPS? So, pagdating kasi sa chess, kailangan mo munang isipin ano yung gusto mong i-move. Kapag minove mo to, ano yung magiging counter move nung kalaban mo. So, you have the luxury of time. Okay? Pwede mong gamitin yung time na yon para iplano kung ano yung gagawin mo before you move. Pagdating sa mga FPS, hindi. Pag nandiyan yung kalaban, bang, 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 baril-baril agad yan. So, hindi mo kailangan, oy, time out. Sisipatin ko muna kung saan ko siya tamang barilin. Time out, magre-reload muna ako, no. Mabilisan doon. So, pag nandun yung kalaban, barilan agad yon, wala kang luxury of time. So, yun po yung tinatawag natin na pace. Okay, gaano kabilis yung progression nung mga laro. So, when you want to quantify the pace preference of players, you should specify what specific type of pace you mean. So, when describing pace preferences, it is important to be as accurate and specific as possible. So, the following are some examples of how you might quantify pace preference for various type of games. So, let's say for chess, that will be slow. Why? It's a turn-based, thoughtful phase. Why? Kasi kailangan mo munang pag-isipan na maigi bago ka makapag-move before you can proceed. Let's say ping pong, very fast, athletic, and reflex-based paced. In a generic computer RPG, that will be alternating between slow and mid-paced action with some slower, thoughtful crafting moments throughout. So, let's say in generic deathmatch, yung sinasabi nga natin na Counter-Strike, no? Fast-paced yan, high dexterity with very little downtime for breaks. For generic 1980s arcade game, moderate and dexterity-based pace to start that gradually ramps up to the fast dexterity until the player can keep up. So, play then starts over. So, ito yung mga sample natin ng mga pace preferences. Next, we have competitiveness. So, some games are built specifically around competitiveness and others avoid it completely. So, ano ba? What is your preference in terms of competitiveness or non-competitiveness in terms of games? So, there are players na ayaw nila ng competitive kasi nakaka-stress makipagsabayan sa iba. They just want non-competitive. Gusto nila laruin yung game na yun at their own pace so they can enjoy it. So, some other people naman, they want yung competitiveness. They want yung, sabihin na natin, yung excitement pagdating dun sa game. Okay? So, different types of game will implement different types of competitiveness and players will have different preferences in terms of competitiveness. If you'll be asking me, what games do I like? I like competitive games. Sabi ko nga sa inyo kanina, I'm playing mostly dati, no, MMORPGs na meron mga player kill. Why? Kasi you want to kill other players. You want to be the strongest. Diba? Competitiveness. In terms of MOBA, gusto mo ikaw yung pinakamagaling. Kaya nga gusto mo maglaro ng MOBA para ikaw yung manalo. Hindi ka naman maglalaro ng MOBA para magpatalo lang. Diba? So, let's say for example of competitiveness, all racing games clearly rank players based on how they finish the race. So, pagdating dito sa mga games na to, in terms of competitive games, no, there will be ranking. There will always be a measure kung sino yung mas magaling na player. Okay? In games such as sandbox games, farming simulations, and other casual games, it is often hard to determine player ability in these games, let alone to compare one player quantitatively against another. So, sandbox games, farming simulations, or basically simulation games, and other casual games, these are the type of games that are non-competitive. If you're making a highly non-competitive game, you want to avoid leaderboards. So, ano ba yung leaderboards na to? Pagdating dito sa leaderboards, this is basically a feature of a game na dito mo nililist kung sino yung mga player na merong matataas na ranks, matataas na high scores, or basically, this is a list of players that performs really good. Top players, top performing players para dun sa mga game na meron ka. Okay? Or any sort of feature na yung score is visible. Kasi score can be a basis of competitiveness. Okay? If you are making a competitive game, you would need to plan well in advance how to track, measure, and display relatively the ability of players. So regardless of which way you want to go with the game, it is a good idea to keep competitiveness in mind from the outset. Whether you want to create a competitive game or you want to create a non-competitive game. So let's say in here, no, what are the some examples and descriptions pagdating dun sa non-competitive and competitive games? So when we say non-competitive games, this game has no scoring, no ability to track, and no ability versus player versus player comparison, or walang PvP. Player versus player comparison. Okay? It is meant to be easy and fun to play and not to make players feel bad about their current ability. So, one very good example nito is yung mga simulator games natin. Okay? Parang ang dating racing, di ba? No, pagdating dito sa simulator games na to, ito, driving simulator na to, wala kang ka-race. All you do is drive. Pwede mong gamitin itong game na to as a tool to simulate truck driving or alam mo yun, it's just a simulation. So this particular game is ito yung Euro Simulator 2. So this is a truck driving simulator, no. So walang competition dito, walang scoring, walang pabilisan. Next, we have competitive games. So the game tracks a few key metrics on a per session basis. At the end of the game session, players are shown a score and given a ranking for that session. So however, each session is individual and the scores are wiped out at the end, allowing the players to feel a bit competitive without being judged overall. So example natin ng game dito, halimbawa ito. So this is an example of a scoreboard for Counter-Strike Global Offensive. So, kapag sinabi natin competitive games, these are type of games na nagre-record sila ng mga scores. Halimbawa, ito, merong KDA dito. So, I assume familiar naman tayo sa KDA, guys, no? Kill, deaths, and assists. So, nire-record natin yung kills, deaths, and assists na to as basis for the score. Kung sino yung mananalo. But, at the end of the game, nawa-wipe out yan. Okay? Para dun sa start ng game, new set of scores na naman. Then, we have yung tinatawag natin na highly competitive games. So, every possible aspect of play is tracked, measured, and displayed in detail for the player. So, individual sessions are tracked and compared, and global leaderboards are dynamically maintained and shown to the player. So, players are encouraged to constantly refine their skills and are driven by climbing leaderboards of different time scales. Let's say, for example, ito. So, I would assume na familiar tayo dito. This is Mobile Legends. So, ito po yung statistics for Mobile Legends, no? Unlike dun sa Counter-Strike, yung scoring kanina, pagkatapos ng game, wipe out na yon, wala na. Pagdating dito sa mga type of games na to, pagdating dito sa mga type of games na to, no, lahat ng mga games na nalaro mo are recorded. Kasi yung mga recorded scores na yon are being used to produce these statistics. Win rate mo, okay? So, halimbawa, kung meron kang MMR, so pataasan ng MMR, so paano ba makukuha yung MMR? Syempre, you'll be recording the scores, yung performance pagdating mo dun sa mga games na yon. Okay? So, those are the different types of competitiveness that can be, alam yun, implemented in different type of games. Next, we have platform preference. So, in terms of platform preference, players will have preferences kung anong klaseng platform ang gagamitin nila. Do they want to play your game sa personal computer or sa PC? Do they want to play the game sa mga console? Or do they want to play the game sa mobile phones nila? So, in terms of platform preference, there's usually 3 pagdating dun sa platform preferences natin. It's PC, your gaming consoles, and your mobile platform. Okay? So, in terms of portability, that will be, of course, the mobile platform. So, usually, in terms of preferences, most of us will prefer playing games sa mga mobile phones natin. Why? We can play it anytime na gusto natin, anywhere na gusto natin. Unlike sa computer, or sa personal computer, or sa Xbox, kailangan, nandun tayo sa isang single location. Kasi nasa bahay, kasi nandun yung personal computer mo eh. Andun yung console mo. Okay? So, you can consider yung platform preference. If you want to have a large, sabihin na natin na large market, I would suggest na you select yung mobile platform. Why? Let's just compare na lang gaano karami yung merong personal computer sa bahay that could be able to play games as compared dun sa number of sabihin na natin, people na merong mobile phones that could play a game. Most of us will have mobile phones and not have computers, di ba? So, if you'll be asking me what is my preferred uh, sabihin na natin platform, I would say mobile. Why? Kasi yung graphics halos pareho na eh. Yung computing power ng personal computers natin, our mobile phones is almost the same na. Malapit na. So, why choose PC kung meron naman games na will have a counterpart dun sa mobile that will have the same experience? Okay? So, in terms of designing your game, you must know alin yung preferred mo na target platform. Okay? So, you will also want to know the specific hardware platforms or the specific hardware ng mga platforms na to in order for you to design your game. Halimbawa, you want to implement ray tracing dun sa game mo. Malalaro mo ba yun sa mobile? As of the moment, hirap ang mobile if you'll be implementing ray tracing kasi wala silang dedicated na graphics card for dedicated na graphics card for ray tracing as compared to personal computers. Kasi meron ng mga graphics card na RTX, di ba? RTX 2000 series and RTX 3000 series. Dedicated sila to play games with ray tracing. So, these are some considerations. But if you'll be developing a simple casual game, I would suggest na you use your mobile platform. Next, we have skill level. So, many games require the players bring some skills with them or quickly develop the skills while playing. So, requiring specific skills for a game will attract some players and repel others. So, when designing games for adults, you can assume that players have the reading skills and basic motors dexterity skills. Okay? So, kapag sinabi nating skills, so let's consider some of these examples. Let's say in tennis, high degree of hand and eye coordination and physical endurance. Why? Can you play yung tennis nang hindi mahaba yung endurance mo, physical endurance mo? No. Tennis is very physical game. So, yung nire-require nyo na skill sa'yo, more on physical skills, hand and eye coordination, and physical endurance. Now, how about chess? The skill requirement in here will be the ability to think out future moves and options. Pagdating dito sa chess, hindi natin pinag-uusapan dito yung physical skill. Ang skill requirement nito is more on mental. Next, we also have FPS or yung first-person shooter. High degree of hand and eye coordination and fast reflexes. We have yung match 3. So, dito naman, ang skill na nire-require sa'yo is pattern recognition. Yung mga match 3 na to, yung tipo mga Candy Crush, ayan. Yan yung mga match 3. Next is sandbox building. So, special awareness. So, pagdating dito sa sandbox building na to, this could be yung mga example natin ng mga strategy games or yung mga, kung naglaro kayo ng Warcraft, yung meron kayong mga different type of units na kinokontrol, etc. etc. Ito, how about poker? Probability calculation. Okay? So, pagdating sa poker, again, no, walang physical requirements. These are more on mental skill. Okay? So, these are some of the examples of the different types of skills that are being required dun sa iba't ibang klase ng game natin. So, the game that you'll be designing will dictate what will be the different type of skills that you'll be requiring for the player. Okay guys, so let's continue. So, our next topic for this module is regarding value gained from players. So, another important factor to consider when designing a game is what value players are going to give you. So, let's say for example, ano ba ang reason why you're playing the game? So, basically, the consideration will be, alam mo yun, to gain money. Monetary value is the primary reason why you're developing a game. Hindi ka naman nagde-develop ng game para lang mapagod, di ba? Okay, so after all, you are going to put considerable amount of time and effort into entertaining your audience and you probably want some form of compensation from your audience in exchange for that experience. So, kaya nga yung mga games natin, so, there is a way for the developers to monetize. But hindi lang naman limited to money or to compensation, monetary compensation, yung values na nagigain ng mga developers from players. There are several others. Okay? So, the simplest form of compensation from players is payment. Okay, monetary value. So, this could be as simple as each player purchasing a copy of the game. So, each form of payment attracts some players and repels others. Why? There are different types of methods pagdating sa payment in terms of games. Those will be discussed, no? Isa-isahin natin yung mga yan. So, knowing the kind of payment you want to get from your player from the start is an important factor in determining how the game is built. Kasi meron mga games decide na, one-time purchase. Okay? Meron mga games na kumikita yung mga developers dun sa pagbili mo ng in-game item. So, a big consideration in designing your game is how are you going to implement payment. So the following section describes a few common types of payment, the pros and cons that you should consider for each type. So yan, the first one that we have is one-time purchase. With one-time purchase, a player buys a game and keep it forever. This is the oldest and most straightforward method of player value. So ang ibig sabihin nito, if you want to play the game, kailangan mo siyang bayaran, kailangan mo siyang bilhin. Okay? Kung hindi mo siya bibilhin, then you won't be able to play the game. So ano ba yung pros and cons for one-time purchase? So for the pros, players pay the entire experience upfront. This is often the larger amount than that is required with other type of games. So, bakit larger amount? Kasi one-time purchase lang yon. Ibig sabihin, one-time ka lang magbabayad. Okay? So, the game can be considered done at some point. Many modern games are in production as long as they ship or even in perpetual development. So, usually, you can expect na if a game will have one-time purchase, pwede mo expect na the game is already sabihin na natin it's already complete. Okay? Siyempre, why are you going to buy a game na hindi pa complete, di ba? So, usually, you can expect na for games with one-time purchase, the game is already complete. Tapos na yung development and it's already a shippable product. For the cons, there is no opportunity to make money after the initial purchase. You as the game developer, syempre, nabayaran ka na, hindi mo na, you're not obliged to fix yung game na yon. Okay? Kasi wala ka nang magiging incentive to fix flaws. Wala ka nang way para pagkakitaan pa ulit yung mga players mo na bumili na ng game. So, there is no opportunity for the development team to get paid continue working on the game. So, usually, pag tapos na yung game na yan, it's already done. Okay? Instead of parang fixing the game, they'll just develop the next chapter. Then, another one-time purchase na naman yon. So, there is no external incentive for players to return to the game for new content. Next one, we have expansions purchase. So, with an expansions purchase, players buy a core game, then they may buy expansions for the game at the latter time to modify or expand the central game. So, kapag sinabi nating expansions, no, kumbaga parang these are additional contents na you can purchase para, alam niyo yun, you'll be able to have new contents to play within the game. So, it's possible na that expansion will include newer quest, new characters to play, or new maps to explore, etc. etc. So, kapag sinabi natin expansion, this is basically an extension or providing new contents for an already existing game. So, these are usually self-contained and fairly small in number. For example, a new expansion pack may come out twice a year. So, let's say, for example, ito, no? We have yung Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. The official game is yung tinatawag na Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. Pero meron siya tinatawag na mga expansions. Halimbawa, ito, yung expansion niya, yung last expansion niya is yung Blood and Wine. For this Blood and Wine, it will be introducing, I believe, 90 new quests, additional characters, and additional map na pwede mong laruin. It could also include new monsters, new armors, new weapons, etc. etc. So, for the pros, no, this format potentially keeps player wanting to revisit the game, which increases other forms of value. So, why? Why revisit? Kasi tulad nung sinabi na natin kanina, no, yung mga expansions na to may come out every year or twice a year. So, basically, kapag natapos mo na yung initial game or yung pinaka-core game mo, if merong lumabas na new expansion, then you can still revisit the game, you can still buy new contents, okay? So, ayun it's an opportunity for the developers to tweak or balance yung mga mistakes na nagawa nila previously dun sa original na game. So, the game can be shipped quickly on a smaller budgets. It is expected that more content will be released on the later game. So, ibig sabihin, hindi mo i-develop ng buo yung game, makakapag-release ka agad ng initial version and mababayaran ka na. If magbo-boom yung game, provide the expansion pack, then additional income na yun for the developers. The game can be sold for a lower price because more money expected from players for the expansions. Okay? So, merong continuity in terms of payment pagdating sa mga game developers. For the cons, player may feel as though the initial game is not a full experience. Of course, no? Kasi the game is probably designed to have expansions. Kumbaga, yung game is parang a pre-released version lang, not the final version. Kasi the final version makikita mo lang yung final versions once na na-release na or nalaro mo na yung mga expansions na yun. So, part of the team is tied up working on expansions instead of new projects, one of the cons, and the audience is much more narrow for an expansion pack than for a new game. Okay? So, let's say for example, instead na makabili ka or instead of just purchasing a new game, possibly na alam mo yon, you'll just want to continue playing that game kasi hindi mo pa nare-reach yung satisfaction level mo. Wait, kasi bitin eh. Possible na bitin yung kwento, bitin yung ending, then saka mo palang makikita yung ending or yung continuation dun sa mismo expansion, sa expansion na yun. Instead na nakapaglaro ka na ng ibang game, you're still stuck dun sa game na yun kasi you still need to play yung expansion set. Next form of payment natin is microtransactions. So, what are microtransactions? So, with microtransaction model, players buy or get the game for free to start. So, usually, pagdating dito sa microtransactions, most of the time, yung mismong game is free. Ibig sabihin, hindi mo babayaran para manlaro mo. But while playing the game, it will be providing you options to make in-game purchases. So, itong mga in-game purchases na to could be just decorative changes. Halimbawa, possible na Mobile Legends na lang, gems. So, saan ba usually ginagamit yung gems? In purchasing yung mga skins, okay, or, alam mo yun, purchasing privileges na hindi naman ganon directly impacting yung result ng game. So, kumbaga, decorative nga lang. Okay? So, kapag ganon, that's the usual na implementation for microtransactions. Pero, if you have played yung mga MMORPG na mga private servers, yung mga tinatawag nilang, ano kasi to? Mga load warriors, yung wherein yung mga tipong mga players na naglo-load sila or nagdo-donate dun sa game so they could have compensations. Okay? So, alam mo yon, sabi nga nila, instead of free to play, it's pay to play. So, kumbaga, those are still considered microtransactions, Kasi you still purchasing items in-game na possible na walang impact or just decorative, or this could be certain items that could have impact dun sa game. So, possible na pwede kang bumili from experience na lang, if you run online. So, way back in high school, bumibili ako ng mga in-game items such as rosary. Or in those rosary, will provide you 2 times experience. So, yung mga ganong klase ng items, they are non-decorative. Kasi, alam mo yun, your experience level or your experience, magta-times 2, mas mabilis ka magle-level. Okay? But still, they are considered microtransactions. Kapag sinabi natin microtransactions, these are basically transactions na ginagawa mo within the game to purchase some in-game items using actual monetary value. For the pros, there is a continuing possible source of income from the players. Kasi, continuing yan halimbawa, you're offering items na doon lang sa microtransactions available, like enhancement or refining items. Babalikan ng mga players yan kasi they want to upgrade their weapons or items. or it could be skins na every time na nag-release ka ng skins, they want to have yung new skins. So, possible na another, ano mo yun, income na naman you as the player. So, games can initially priced low or madalas nga, sabi ko nga kanina, it's free, which greatly expands the potential market of players. So, players can specifically tailor their purchases to their own taste. Depende naman yan sa ino-offer nung game, kung anong klaseng microtransactions yung gusto nyong i-offer. For the cons, purchasing in-game items feel like cheating in a competitive game. So, kaya nga pagdating dun sa ibang game, most of the games ngayon that will implement microtransactions, usually for decorative purposes na lang yun ang may bili in the in-game store. For something na walang malaking impact pagdating dun sa competitiveness ng game. So, players may feel that they are being nickel and dime. Ibig sabihin, parang pineperahan lang sila ng game. If constantly yung game will be asking you to buy in-game items para mag-progress dun sa game. Yung tipong hindi ka pwede mag-level up or hindi ka pwede change job hanggat hindi mo binibili to. Something like that. So, much of the developed content may not be used if players don't buy games, no? There are certain games that implemented microtransactions but merong mga type ng games na hindi well-designed yung microtransactions nila wherein players can still play the game kahit hindi bumibili ng mga in-game items. Okay? Meron na akong mga nalaro na game like yung Decaron, if you're familiar. Decaron or 2 games. That's an MMORPG way back on my college, no? So, yun, namatay yung game na yun kasi walang masyadong bumibili ng mga in-game items. So, yun yung flow ng game na yun. So, the base game may feel unsatisfying. Conversely, the game may feel good enough for the players decide they don't need to buy anything and therefore the game does not make any money. So, yun nga yung sinasabi ko kanina, no? The design of the game should, alam mo yun, should have a balance wherein players may opt out not to buy the in-game items using actual monetary value, but kapag hindi nila binili, hindi naman sila madedehado. Or kapag binili naman nila, hindi naman sila OP, hindi naman sila imbalance once na they purchase those certain in-game items. Dapat, alam nyo yun, it's just balanced. Next is advertising. So, with advertising, players pay a reduced amount of the game or no money at all. And the developers make money from in-game advertising. Halimbawa, these are the type of games na free-to-play, tapos kumikita yung mga developers by placing ads within their games. Halimbawa ito, this is a Mortal Kombat. So, nasaan yung advertising dyan? Ito, nandito sa background. As you can see, this is a banner of McDo. So, as you can see, while playing the game, makikita mo itong ganitong klase ng advertisements. So, basically, yung mga developers dyan, kumikita sila galing dito sa mga companies na nag-a-advertise ng mga game. So, usually, yung mga websites na binivisit natin, halimbawa Facebook. If you're using Facebook, wala naman tayong binabayaran eh. It's same concept kasi meron lumalabas ng mga advertisements ng mga products, no, or services. It's advertising. So, it's a way para makapag-gather ng monetary value yung mga developers ng mga games. For the pros, the game can be inexpensive or free for players, no? Leading to a potentially larger audience. The game has a continuing source of income para dun sa mga developers kasi, ayun, may ads sila. The payment is fair in that players who watch advertising are not purchasing an advantage to the game. So, ibig sabihin, no, it's fair for all. So, kung lahat kayo nanonood ng advertisement, o hindi kayo nanonood ng advertisement, napapansin nyo yung advertisement or hindi, it won't have any impact pagdating dun sa game. For the cons, ad revenue tends to be rather low on a per-player basis. So, it takes a whole lot of players seeing a lot of ads to pay a development team. So, usually, makikita nyo siguro to dun sa mga MMO, massively multi-online playing game. So, kung saan maraming mga players, okay? So, a player is pulled out of the game experience by the ads. Often, the developer has limited or no controls in the ads being shown. So, the ads may have a conflicting message to the intention of the game or may even be for a competitor. Okay? So, next, So here are the other forms of value. So in the end, money is the goal of professional development. But there is not always a direct path from creating a game to piles of cash, no? So developers can gain other forms of value from players as well. So that will be yung mga items na ililist natin dito. So the following are few of the ways of types of values besides money that you can gain from players, you as developers. Halimbawa, word of mouth. So, yung mga other forms of values na to, hindi sila directly money ang nakukuha or nagigain ng mga development team. Mostly, ang nagigain nila dito will be advertisement. Okay? So, yung advertisement na yon, alam mo yon, your game will have advertisement. It could reach a lot more potential players that could eventually produce you money. It won't be directly providing you cash or money, but alam mo yon, at the end game, it will still get you money. But aside from money, pwede rin yung magisikat yung game mo through advertisement via word of mouth. So when players like a game and discuss it with their friends, and their friends are more likely to get the game. So when a game has mechanics built into it that get players to play with each other, seek out people to stay with it, or just talk about the game, there are more opportunities to bring a bigger audience. So, eto yung mga type of games na possibly na free sila, but they'll be asking you to advertise their games via different types. So, isang example doon is word of mouth. Possible din na yung sa social media. Okay? So, pagdating sa social media, word of mouth, social media, pareho lang ito. These are both advertisement. So, social media is an even more expansive but less personal form of getting the message out than the word of mouth. So, it's essentially allow players to act as free advertising. So, ibig sabihin, pwede mong gamitin yung mga players mo as advertising. Okay? So, while social media can help a small game reach a much larger audience, there can be a backlash over spam games in social media. Let's say, for example, yung game implements a certain mechanic na kapag shinare mo to, you'll be able to get some reward. Maraming games na nag-i-implement yan. Okay? So, pwede ka makapag-advertise, makita ng mga friends mo yan sa social media na nilalaro mo yung game na yon. Okay? Na-advertise mo yung game, tapos ang kapalit, nagkakaroon ka ng konting rewards within the game. Okay? Next is ranking sites. So, many websites have ranking list of new games based on player scores. Games with high scores are typically more attractive to new players. So, some small games have broken out and become successful simply by having a consistent and growing following of high scores in ranking sites. Halimbawa ito, sample ng ranking sites for private servers. So, that will be extreme100.com. So, dito, yung mga games, they are asking their players to vote yung mismong game na nilalaro nila for the ranking sites. Kasi mas mataas yung ranking mo dito sa mga ranking sites na to, alam mo yun, there will be most probably mas maraming player yung makikita sa'yo. Yung tipo, pagka-search mo dito sa websites, o rimbawa, pumunta ka ng Google, you're searching top 10 ganitong klase ng game. Kung mataas yung score mo out of these ranking sites, or meron kang articles from different types of website, then most probably mas marami kang maa-attract. Again, no, it all boils down to advertising. So, word of mouth, social media, and ranking sites, katulad ng sinabi natin kanina, it all boils down to advertising. So, advertising para mas magkaroon ng maraming audience yung game nyo that could turn potentially from players to money. So, mas maraming players na naglalaro dun sa game mo, mas maraming pera ay pwedeng pumasok sa'yo. Okay? So, next is, or the final topic nung ating discussion for this module is target audience composite. So, ano ba yan? First, once you determine the attributes that you want and don't want in the players you are making in the game, you need to do something with this information. So, kanina, diniscuss natin yung different type of attributes of your players. One thing you can do is to create a target audience profile. So, kung alam mo na yung mga attributes ng mga players kanina, like yung age, yung tolerance level nila, yung skill nila, pwede ka na ngayon gumawa ng target audience composite. So, this is basically an audience profile based on sa mga attributes na pinakita natin kanina. So these profiles were created based on games that are already exist. So it will be provided, or I'll be showing you some examples, no? And they show that you can examine target audience profiles after you put out a game in order to look out at the kinds of players you ended up targeting. So halimbawa, let's say chess. Yung mga attributes na binanggit natin kanina, ito yan. So learning new rules, challenge level, time investment, pace, competitiveness. So isa-isahin natin. So let's say for example, chess. What type of players are this? So resistant. So this player is willing to learn a small number of unchanging rules so they can play the game repeatedly with the same and new opponents around the world. Challenge level, it's variable. Why? The player will find the right challenge level by finding the right opponent. It will vary. The challenge level will vary depending on the opponent na meron ka, no? For the time investment, sessions are around 30 minutes and there is no total time. For the phase, it's very slow and thoughtful. Next, competitiveness. Highly competitive. One player will win or lose every session. So the drive to beat the current opponent is the motivating factor for playing the game. For the platform na ginamit, no, it's analog, board, and pieces. For the skills required, very little. Only the ability to comprehend the basic rules. And value gained from the player will be word of mouth and player pool. Next, we have Galaga. So ito, medyo old school na itong game na to na Galaga, no? Some of you will be familiar dito sa game na to. So this is a brief description of the game Galaga. So the gameplay of Galaga puts the player in control of a spacecraft which is situated at the bottom of the screen, with enemy aliens arriving in the formation at the beginning of the stage, either trying to destroy, collide with, or capture the spaceship, with the player progressing every time alien forces are vanquished. Okay, so ayan. So, eto, it's a side-scroller na type of, alam nyo yun, shooting game. So, ito yung spaceship mo, then you need to eliminate lang itong mga enemies na to. You have your score in here. So, let's see the target audience composite ng mga to. First, learning new rules. So, this will fall on resistant. So, the player is not interested in learning complex controls and systems, but want to get right into the game immediately and figure out the mechanics through trial and error. So, next is challenge level. So, very high. Failure is assured with every session. So, the player is happy to start playing knowing that every session will end in failure. Next is time investment. Low. Kasi yung mga sessions natin will only last for around 5 minutes and there is no total time. So, if you're playing Galaga in arcade, yung total time mo, wala yun kasi every time that you're adding coins or tokens, you'll be able to continue with the game. So, for the pace, player likes to start at the moderate pace and keep playing as the pace increases at the point they can keep up. Next, competitiveness, high. Players can see their scores and try to do a better. So, a public scoreboard enhances competitiveness at the arcade machine. So, players are driven to beat their own high score and get their initials to the public leaderboard. So, for the platform, it's an arcade cabinet. So, skills required, hand and eye, coordination, and reflexes. And for the value gain, so a direct payment. A quarter gets a short one-play session. Itong quarter na to refers to either coins or tokens. Okay? Then, yung last game natin for the target audience composite will be Mario Kart. So, this is just a short description of Mario Kart. It is a series of racing video games published by Nintendo on various consoles, no? So, featuring a number of characters from the company's Mario or Super Mario franchise. So, the goal of the game is to traverse multiple racetracks based on the location seen on the Mario franchise, and the player can choose their own character and kart parts. So, ito po yung ating target audience composite. So, for Mario Kart, the learning new rules is more on the resistant group. So, the mechanics and controls are in line with those with other racing games. So, a player who has ever played any racing games will be able to quickly transition. So, further, a player who has driven a car knows the rough analogy of the game is using. Then, we have in challenge level. For the challenge level, it's high. So, that will be 5/1 failure rate. So, when the players start, they lose against an artificial intelligence or AI most of the time. So as players get better, the AI and challenge level increases consistently to keep players losing frequently. So this ratio of loss motivates player to come back for more and improve their skills. So for this example of target audience composite, particularly in the challenge level, no, this is guys just an estimation. Kasi tulad ng binigay natin kanina na sample kanina, yung 1/15 and yung 100/1, those are just examples on how are you going to describe the challenge level. So you're just going to estimate using itong metrics na to. So gaano karami yung failures over the number of successes. For the time investment, it's low. Sessions are around just 15 minutes and a total time of 100 hours is required to unlock all rewards. If only you want to unlock all the rewards, no? So, possible na yung total time natin will vary depende dun sa player if he or she wants to unlock all the rewards or he or she just wants to finish all the different tracks na meron in the game. For the pace, it's very high. There is no time for contemplation in this game. Kasi nga, it's a racing game, no? Competitiveness, it's very high. Players are ranked per race and there are multiple leaderboards. For the platform, it's Nintendo game systems exclusively. Okay? So, for the skills required, that will be basic racing games. Siguro most probably, hand and eye coordination din. Value gained from players. Payment is primary and player interaction is secondary. So, that will be the target audience composite for Mario Kart. Okay? So, next, what to do with the target audience profile? So, para saan ba itong mga target audience profile natin na to, no? So, you can use this audience profile as a guide through the rest of the game making process. Let's say, for example, before you proceed in developing the game, it is highly suggestible that you create your audience profile or your target audience profile. So, para yung mga features ng game, you can match it dun sa target audience profile mo para, alam mo yon, you can target the right audience. Itong right audience na to, okay, malalaro nila na maayos yung game based dun sa kanilang mga expectations. Okay? Each time there is a question for a new feature, system, or data that team should consider, ang lagi lang itatanong natin dito is, will this make the audience happy? Why? Kasi, if your audience or your players will be happy para dun sa game na yon, no, possible na, alam mo yon, mas maraming games yung mabibenta mo. If you'll be implementing expansions, then mas maraming expansions yung mabibenta mo. If you'll be implementing microtransactions, then mas maraming bibili ng mga in-game items mo dun sa game. By constantly coming back to the target, the process of making the game becomes more grounded. Okay? Or ibig sabihin, mas nakalinya ka dun sa kung ano ba yung tina-target mo in the development of the game. So, as much as possible, before proceeding with creating a game, no? So, there should be a target audience profile. Okay? So, that will be the end of our discussion, guys, for our module 2. If you have questions, no? Alam niyo naman kung saan ako kontakin. So, ito yung email ko, yung messenger ko. Then, if you'll be using this link, it will automatically redirect you sa MS Teams para ma-message nyo ako. Or, pwede nyo gamitin itong contact number na to para kontakin ako. Again, no, katulad ng sinabi ko sa inyo previously from your previous subject sa akin, yung math, you can contact me from Monday to Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. So, guys, kung kukontakin nyo man itong number na to, please mag-text na lang po kayo from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Kapag naka-receive po ako ng text ng after 5, most probably, re-replyan ko na lang po yan ng tawag nito, ng the following day. Okay? Or kapag, halimbawa, after 5 na, meron tumatawag na makulit and I know na estudyante, ibablock ko na lang po yung number. Please, use this number responsibly. Okay? If it's urgent, saka nyo lang po gamitin itong contact number ko na to. Okay? So, kung hindi naman po urgent yung mga concerns nyo, pwedeng mag-message na lang po kayo sa Messenger or mag-message na lang po kayo sa MS Teams. Okay? So that will be it for this module, guys. Thank you.